Tell me something. What situation isn't improved by pizza?
Depending on where you live, you may or may not know of Little Caesars, an international juggernaut with locations in North America, Asia, the Middle East, Australia, and Latin America. The $5 pizza restaurant was founded in Detroit, Michigan in the late 1950s by the man who would later own the Detroit Red Wings and the Detroit Tigers. While we delve into everything about the little pizza place that could, let's take a crack at the top 10 things you might not know about Little Caesars. Little Caesars is the third largest pizza chain.
It's true what they say. It's lonely at the top, unless you have an extra most bestest pizza.
If you have heard of them, you may recall Little Caesars from the late 80s and early 90s, only for it to seemingly disappear. Despite that though, Little Caesars is actually the third largest pizza chain in the United States, based on gross sales, meaning that it sells more than every other pizza chain outside of Pizza Hut and Domino's Pizza. Its net sales or profit is another story, but considering that they're famous for their $5 pizzas, it's actually pretty amazing to hear that they outsell places like Papa John's.
You can sell anything, sell me this pen right here. You can sell anything, sell that.
Which is a lot more expensive than Little Caesars. That means that they're doing a ton more transactions than the competition. So what are the top 10 pizza joints? From top to bottom, they are Pizza Hut, Domino's, Little Caesars, Papa John's, Papa Murphy's, California Pizza Kitchen, Marco's Pizza, Round Table Pizza, Mellow Mushroom, and Cece's Pizza. Considering that many of those aren't located in all 50 states, and that some don't even sell hot pizza like Papa Murphy's, it's not looking like Little Caesars' reign as a top 3 pizza chain is at risk anytime soon.
I'm not too worried about it, really. Don't worry about it. I'm not worried at all.
Before we continue, show us some love and click that subscribe button and hit that notification bell. The first Little Caesars opened in 1959 and is still open today.
You're still here?
The first Little Caesars was opened by the husband and wife duo of Mike and Marian Ilitch in May of 1959 in Garden City, Michigan, a suburb of Detroit. The building the original restaurant was located in is still there and still in operation, which is rare for any fast food restaurant, as needs and technology have changed over the decades, meaning most original locations simply can't handle the reality of serving food in 2018.
You can't handle the truth!
That original restaurant is located inside a strip mall, which makes it even more surprising, as strip malls seem to be more of a late 70s to early to mid 80s thing than a late 1950s thing. The first restaurant opened on May 8th, though the name has changed a bit, as has the original menu, which included chicken, fish, shrimp, and hot dogs. At that original location stands a plaque that discusses how important it was to the Ilitch family, the Detroit metropolitan area, and pizza lovers everywhere. But outside of that, and unlike other first locations, it's mostly business as usual, which, as of the day after the death of its founder, had been running for over 21,000 days. Pizza, indeed.
Indeed.
Little Caesars Pizza Treat.
I'm in love. I'm having a relationship with my pizza.
As was alluded to in the previous entry,
are there 2 L's in alluded?
The original name of Little Caesars wasn't Little Caesars, at least not solely. That's right, the original title was actually Little Caesars Pizza Treat. Quite the mouthful for a restaurant that takes pride in being blue-collar, affordable, and without frills. The different names stemmed from one of the most important aspects of a successful marriage, and that's compromise.
You want compromise? How's this?
So when it came time to name their new restaurant, the Ilitches had a difference in opinion on what to call it. Marian wanted to name it Little Caesars, whereas Mike wanted to name it Pizza Treat. And so they decided to meet in the middle and call it Little Caesars Pizza Treat. And it's pretty safe to say that Marian had the better idea, as Pizza Treat just sounds weird, like calling McDonald's hamburgers yum. So where did the name Little Caesar come from? As it turns out, that was the nickname of Marian Ilitch, although no one has ever really explained exactly why that's her nickname or what it means. But considering the reputation that Julius Caesar had and how he met his downfall,
we should totally just stab Caesar!
You'd have to think it wasn't a nickname that she was given out of love. Despite his inability to think of a great name for his restaurant, at least Mike could cook a decent pizza. At the time of his death, he was worth billions of dollars and the owner of 2 successful sports franchises. He would have also owned a third in the Detroit Lions if the NFL didn't have a rule against owning teams in other leagues. Speaking of which…
Shouldn't you be in Detroit losing a football game right now?
The Ilitch sports dynasty started with softball.
What are you going to call this game?
What else? Sticky McSchnickens.
It's safe to say that not only was Mike Ilitch a huge fan of sports, but also one of the best owners. He won numerous championships throughout his years. His first foray into owning a sports team was for a team called the Detroit Caesars, which, while a little on the nose, was actually a team in the now-defunct American Professional Slow-Pitch Softball League. The team began play in the 1977 season and was part of a sport that Little Caesars had heavily sponsored in and around Detroit that decade. The team played at Memorial Field in East Detroit and had a few former pro baseball players on their roster, like former Detroit Tigers Jim Northrup and Norm Cash, as well as some top-tier softball players like Mike Nye, Bert Smith, and Tex Collins. The team was good, winning 2 World Series of softball before they disbanded after the 1979 season. And while some may consider that to be a failure,
There's no crying in baseball. There's no crying in baseball!
it did teach Ilitch what owning a professional team was like, and was the beginning of a very lucrative career as the owner of professional sports teams around Detroit.
We don't stink right now.
Ilitch owned the Detroit Red Wings and the Detroit Tigers.
The world knows that this is hockey town!
Ilitch moved on after the Detroit Caesars ceased operation to one of the major 4 sports, hockey, purchasing a Red Wings team that is now valued as one of the most expensive franchises in the sport. As a member of the original 6 teams alongside other teams like the Toronto Maple Leafs, Boston Bruins, and Montreal Canadiens, the Red Wings were a complete steal for Ilitch, who purchased the team for $8 million from Bruce Norris before the 1982 season. Considering that the most recent evaluation of the team is north of $600 million, it's safe to say that it was a sound investment. That's not solely because of inflation either, as Ilitch was able to take the team that was known as the Dead Wings to one that was a perennial contender. Ilitch soon found that owning one team wasn't enough, and ended up purchasing the Detroit Tigers in 1992 from another pizza magnate, Tom Monahan, who founded Domino's Pizza. This transition was a lot less smooth, as they had a losing record for 12 of his first 13 seasons as an owner. He also expressed interest in purchasing the Detroit Pistons in 2010 in the hopes that he'd keep the Pistons in Detroit and stop them from moving to another location, like Seattle. He even expressed interest in purchasing the Detroit Lions over the years, but the NFL has strict and confusing rules about their owners also owning other teams in different sports, so that never went beyond the vague interest phase.
Am I the only one around here who gives a about the rules?
The Little Caesars logo.
A lot of people really love Little Caesars. I like the box the best.
Perhaps outside of Domino's, with its hyper-obvious and simple logo, there is no more recognizable pizza chain logo than that of Little Caesars, with its Roman emperor taking a bite of pizza while he holds up the rest of the pie on the end of a spear. Some companies spend tens of millions on logos and branding. Beyond that then comes rebranding, which means pulling all old product off the shelves, or in the case of a restaurant, basically creating new signage for each location, for every delivery car or truck, and also changing out all of the napkins and pizza boxes. The most egregious example of this stemmed from the new Pepsi logo this century, which reportedly cost the soda giant upwards of $1 billion. And when all was said and done, it was basically just a ripoff of Barack Obama's campaign logo. So it's actually pretty refreshing to hear that the Little Caesars logo was first drawn on the back of a cocktail napkin by Don Silverstein, who was a friend of the Ilitches. He came up with the logo not long after the first restaurant opened in May of 1959, and while it's become one of the most iconic in the entire restaurant industry, it couldn't have cost the Ilitch couple more than whatever the cost of the bar tab was that night.
You got your pint, you got your pig snacks. What more do you want?
And hopefully every night for the rest of Silverstein's life. Considering how creepy fast food logos were at the time, we're looking at you, Burger King. It's actually surprising that the Little Caesars logo turned out so well.
Oh, well done.
The Little Caesars HQ is cutting edge.
Yes, I love technology.
Little Caesars has always been considered on the forefront of pizza cooking technological advancements, and that progressive mindset is something that has clearly worked well for them over the years, and doesn't stop solely at pizza. For example, its international headquarters was recently opened and featured a lot of first-of-a-kind technology. The facade on the 9-story building was the first of its kind for any building, wherein the gigantic pieces of glass that form the facade are shaped like slices of pizza.
Well, I get it. It's very clever.
And that's clearly not an accident. Each of the 14-foot-tall pieces of glass is a technological marvel, and beyond the fact that it points to the signature product of Little Caesars, it also points to the fact that Little Caesars has been an innovator for as long as it's been in business, which will be 60 years next May. The idea is also that the facade will provide a ton of natural light, more collaboration space, and amazing views of downtown Detroit. The new facility will also have 3 times the amount of space for research and development, which, while that sounds sort of funny for a pizza place, is actually a large part of what all fast food places do, as well as having state-of-the-art test kitchens, sensory panels, and quality assurance operations at their headquarters.
Cool beans.
Cool beans.
Cool.
Beans. Little Caesars was the first to use a conveyor oven.
Ooh, dinner time.
If you go into basically any sandwich or pizza fast food chain, you'll most likely see what is called a conveyor oven, which is basically an oven that fits over a conveyor belt, which pulls the product through it at different speeds depending on how long each needs to be cooked or toasted. Considering how state-of-the-art their headquarters is, it may not surprise you to hear that Little Caesars was essentially the first fast food chain to fully embrace that technology, something that Little Caesars rolled out in 1997 and has a patent for. That cuts down on the amount of time spent cooking each pizza.
Pizza time.
And also cuts down on the need for a single employee to stay at the oven and pull out each pizza individually. For anyone who has ever held that job, it's brutal, as you're just as often getting burned as you are over or under cooking pizzas. It also cuts down on the amount of space needed for traditional ovens, instead opting for a system that is a lot less bulky and expensive, something that is really important when your profit margin is as thin as a place that sells pizza for $5.
Help me, I'm poor.
They say that competition breeds innovation, and in no other fast food restaurant chain is that more apparent than at Little Caesars, especially considering its most recent patent. Little Caesars has patented a pizza cooking robot.
Yo, I haven't got all day. What kind of pizza you guys want?
A year or two ago, there was a push by fast food workers across the United States for a new minimum wage increase to that of $15 an hour. For the first time in history, as opposed to stating that the increase would simply amount to layoffs, the corporations behind those jobs, like McDonald's, instead warned that the increase would mean that they'd move from human employees to automated ordering stations, therefore cutting down on the amount of actual human people that they'd have in their stores. While that sounded crazy, the reality isn't that far off, and the proof of it actually stems from the patent that Little Caesars received in March 2018. That patent was for an automated apparatus provided for assembling pizza, which includes a pizza sauce spreading station, a cheese spreading station, and a pepperoni applying station, for a robot that will have an articulating arm with a gripper attached to grab onto pizzas, as well as a rotary dial system to ensure proper cheese and pepperoni distribution. Little Caesars is actually framing the robot as something that'll make the job of humans in the restaurant better, as it'd partially automate the labor-intensive endeavor of pizza making, which frees workers up to perform other value-added tasks, while improving on efficiency and ensuring a more consistent product for the customers of Little Caesars. It's actually been said by those in the know that the future of labor will increasingly have to deal with automation. It definitely sounds a lot like the plot to the first Terminator, where Arnold's T-800 Terminator robot travels back in time to murder Sarah Connor after her son, John Connor, failed to tip him in the future for the pizza he delivered to his apartment.
I'll be back.
In 30 minutes or less. Pizza pizza used to mean pizza pizza.
Pizza, pizza. Delivery. Pizza. Delivery. Pizza.
There may be no more iconic catchphrase for a fast food chain than
Pizza, pizza.
Mainly because it stood the test of time and isn't something that changes every few years, like McDonald's with its several catchphrases over the years. It turns out that the pizza pizza started as a promotion that wasn't meant to last decades. And while the promotion itself did end, the saying was so popular that the restaurant decided to continue using it as its general catchphrase. That promotion was basically that you could come in with a coupon or proof of the cost of a pizza from Pizza Hut or Domino's, and Little Caesars would offer you not only one pizza for the same price, but 2 pizzas for the price of 1 pizza elsewhere. Meaning that if Pizza Hut was offering a large 2-topping pizza on special, you could go to Little Caesars with that ad and actually walk out with 2 2-topping pizzas. With that context, it actually makes a lot of sense why their slogan is
Pizza, pizza.
As you're receiving 2 pizzas. This is, unfortunately, a situation where knowledge isn't power, because now that we know the catchphrase story, all we can do is sadly look back on the good old days where you could walk out of Little Caesars with 2 pizzas for the same price as 1 pizza at Papa John's. Although, considering the fact that you can still get a large pizza for $5 at Little Caesars, it's safe to assume you still can. Which makes sense considering that you're paying for robots to construct your pizzas. What's your favorite pizza chain? Let us know in the comments. And be sure to click that subscribe button and hit that notification bell. And since you're here, check out some of our other great videos.